So you clicked live?
I clicked live. We are here.
One
A,
one.
jih-
Huh. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that.
a jihadi struck the city of New Orleans. 10 people dead and more jihad to come. And things ain't always as they seems. The Christian terrorist in France turned out to be another one. A jihadi, that is, who wanted to kill for Allah and found the Western authorities as soft as a marshmallow. Anyway, yes, bad poetry, ladies and gentlemen. But we are here, and it is This Week in Jihad. And the poetry is so bad, in fact, that nobody can make anything like it. I have to apologize. This has been a couple weeks now because we took a week for Christmas, and so I didn't set this up. So anybody who's here, I appreciate you being here. But those of you who are not here, we love you too. A little bit discombobulated, ladies and gentlemen, but we have David Wood with us tonight. How are you, David?
Yeah, so everyone was watching. Robert sets up the show ahead of time, and then we were like 1 minute away from going live, and he goes, "Wait a minute, I didn't set up a show." And so anyway, so then we had to figure out what happens when you just click live and roll with it.
So here we are. We got 26 likes. Tell your friends, tell your ma, tell your pa. It's This Week in Jihad, ladies and gentlemen. It's happening now, right here on this channel, right here, ladies and gentlemen, on the Jihad Watch video channel, demonetized but still coming at you with all the truth that you need. David, we got Jihad in the U.S. just this morning, 3:15 a.m. in New Orleans.
Yep.
A man named Shamsuddin Jabbar.
Quaker.
Shamsuddin
Obvious Quaker.
Jabbar, obviously Amish. There he is, and he drove a truck down Bourbon Street, killed at least 10 people, injured many more in a vehicular jihad attack.
I saw the more recent one was 15.
Is it? Okay. It's breaking
But
news.
I have seen 10 a bit, and everything's a bit sketchy when the news is breaking because you get conflicting reports and so on. But yep.
Everything is quite sketchy about this one. There's been a lot of sketchiness here, David. In the first place, Alethea, let me get her name right. Alethea Duncan, who is the FBI special agent in New Orleans. And she said at the beginning of this whole episode this morning that there was no terrorism. This was not a terrorist attack.
That is good to know, Robert, because when a guy rents a truck and is flying an ISIS flag off the back of the truck, and he goes around, he drives up onto the sidewalk to get around the police car that's blocking Bourbon Street. He jumps up on there, goes around it, and plows through a ton of people. And then at the end of plowing through all these people, jumps out and starts shooting. I have to say, some people would be wondering if that's a terrorist attack or not. And so it's good that we have the FBI to set us straight.
Well, the FBI did come around a little bit later. They said that they were investigating it as a terror attack after all. But I do think it's very curious. One guy got very upset with me when he read my article from this morning saying, "You can't criticize the FBI for that. They were just being prudent and cautious and waiting." But they did not actually demonstrate any prudence or caution. That would have been saying, we don't know yet what this is. But they didn't say that. They said this is not terrorism.
Yeah, it actually makes sense even when we're suspecting terrorism and so on. It makes sense if you don't know yet, because a person can just go out and kill a bunch of people, and it doesn't have to be terrorism. It could just be mass murder. People still don't understand the difference. Terrorism, you're trying to convey some point about an ideology, or there's a message attached to your attack. If you're just mad at life and you go out and kill a bunch of people, or if like Bourbon Street, when it popped up about Bourbon Street, it's like car crashes into people. It could just be someone who's drunk, right? Could just be someone who's partying all night, got into his car, and confused the accelerator with the brake and plowed into a bunch of people. That sort of thing can happen. So it makes sense to be a little hesitant there. But even with the FBI, as you pointed out, that wasn't like cautious. That wasn't just being cautious. And by that time, she knew that the guy's waving an ISIS flag and opened fire afterwards. So I don't know why you deny it. That's just weird.
There's funny
Never,
stuff about
never
that
gonna live.
flag.
Never gonna live that down. Never gonna live that down. That's what
They,
she'll always be remembered for.
that's right, and she shouldn't live it down. Although I'm sure she's a fine agent as far as agents go. The problem is it's part of the whole culture of the Bureau now to deny Islamic Jihad, to assume that there's no jihad when there is, and to cover it up when they can't deny it. And this is an indication of that, David, or at least it might be. Now, if you look at that picture, that is a picture. The white truck is the attacker's truck. That is Shamsuddin Jabbar's truck. And that is after he drove down Bourbon Street and he killed all those people. Now, poking up over the cars is the flagpole that was on his truck. And you can see that the flag, it's either furled or it's covered up. It's a little bit hard to tell. It's hard to tell in this photo, and it's hard to tell in other photos that I saw. It looks as if one of two things may have happened. That the flag was all wrapped up around the flagpole so that people could not see what it was. And that might actually make sense, because it's just remotely possible while he was driving all that time, that wherever he came from, that is, that he might have wanted to not attract suspicion by having this ISIS flag waving on the back of his truck. That's possible. But the other possibility is that that's not a flag at all, but that's a coat, which is what it actually looks like. And in other photos, it also looks like a coat. And it may well be that some people have said it was a coat. I don't know. I wasn't there. And I'm not saying that this is for certain. But some people initially reported that the cops covered up the flag on the flagpole with a coat. And I think I would love to say that couldn't have happened. Except I know the cops. Not in New Orleans. I just mean in general. That there is a general policy of covering up jihad attacks. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't put it past them, is all I'm saying.
No, and they have good reason, Robert, because as I'm sure CARE is about to inform us, if they haven't already, that these are the times to really be concerned about the spread of Islamophobia.
Yes, yes. I'm sure we're going to be getting that. I'm surprised we haven't already gotten the beginning of the backlash stories.
Yeah, guys, so remember, after every terrorist attack where a jihadi slaughters unbelievers in the name of Allah, these are the times when we need to recognize that Islamophobia is a problem. And this is why we need more government agencies working on the dangers of Islamophobia to silence all critics of Islam. So that attacks like these are never, ever, ever associated with Islam.
You know, another thing about this is that, according to reports anyway, Shamsuddin Jabbar was born in the United States. He's an American citizen. And a lot of people are making a lot of that, as if it matters. And they're saying, see, it's homegrown terrorism. It's not foreign terrorism. Now, homegrown versus foreign terrorism is a distinction that is usually drawn between terrorists who are not Muslim, and those are the homegrown ones, supposedly right-wingers or whatever, and terrorists who are jihadis. Now, the thing is, this guy's a jihadi who was born in the United States, and the whole distinction between homegrown and foreign terrorism breaks down on that basis, because it's very clear from the fact that Shamsuddin Jabbar had this ISIS flag, and he does this vehicular jihad attack. He's clearly a committed jihadi, and yet he was born and raised in the United States. So all the Muslims in the United States are supposed to be moderate and peaceful and reject jihad violence, and yet here's a guy who didn't. Where did he get it? Are we going to hear now that he was radicalized on the internet, or is there going to be a realistic appraisal and an investigation of where he learned about Islam?
And Robert, these Texas Muslims, they're getting pretty creepy. And not just for this. So you had this attack. Remember a couple of was like 2 or 3 years ago. I know because I was at a debate, and while I was at a debate, literally while we're debating, there's a terrorist attack going on at a synagogue there in Texas. Um, so that was Texas. This guy is from Texas. You have the Muslim cowboy, one of the world's most prolific defenders of child marriage. He is from. He's a Texan. You have Daniel Hakikachu. I've heard he's Texan. He's also one of the world. He is probably the world's most prolific defender of child marriage and wife beating and all these other things. That's Daniel Hakikachu. You had what was it, like 2 months ago or something like that? There was news of the guy who ran the Revolution Dawa campaign and so on as part of the Islamic school down there in Texas, was turned in by his wife for convincing his Quran students to make pornographic videos with their daughters and so
Oh
on.
yeah, I remember
And yeah, so I mean, once again, hats off to his wife for actually going to the cops and not being so worried about protecting her religion and the school and so on. If your husband is having kids make porn and stuff, that's time to call the cops, ladies. And so anyway, this is all going on straight out of Texas. So might need to pay attention to what's going on in the mosques down there at some point, but that would be Islamophobic. So that's what we want to avoid at all costs, no matter how many people have to die, no matter how many kids get molested and so on.
Exactly, David. And speaking of Islamophobia, do you remember this clown?
Was that guy who killed people and stabbed some kids or something on a playground?
Yeah, in France. His name, according to the media anyway, is Abdelmasih Hanoun, and he is supposed to be a Christian Arab and he certainly was caught on the video screaming, "In the name of Jesus Christ," as he stabbed these children on a playground. And this was a big story last year. It was June 8th, 2023. I was actually on a show with Hakikaju, and he was bringing this up as an indication of how Jihad Watch was not reliable. My website that tracks this jihad attacks, because I said I doubt this guy's really a Christian. And everybody was saying, you see, Christians can do terrorism just as much as Muslims. And this guy's out screaming, "In the name of Jesus Christ," in English, incidentally, while he's on a French playground stabbing little babies. Now, this is a very strange story for obvious reasons, but very interesting thing happened recently. Henri d'Anselme, who was a Frenchman who actually stopped this guy on the playground while he was in the middle of his stabbing spree. He did an interview on a French podcast, and he says, this guy's file is known now. I met the magistrate who had taken care of his file. And this is what he says about this alleged Christian terrorist, David. He was a former member of Bashar al-Assad's army, a deserter, affiliated with the Islamic State. That's ISIS, kids. That's the same ISIS that led to this attack in New Orleans this morning. Affiliated with the Islamic State, who did stupid things with the Islamic State, who found after a while that it wasn't very funny, who therefore wanted to ask for political asylum in Europe. But he was told that to be able to have political asylum in Europe, you have to be either an Eastern Christian or homosexual. Declaring as an Eastern Christian or declaring as homosexual will make the process easier for you. Therefore, he declared himself an Eastern Christian. So in fact, he faked his identity in Turkey, and in fact, after that, he began a relationship with a real Christian. Suddenly, he rebuilt his life with her in Sweden. But after a while, the girl realized the deception. They still had a kid together and so on, but he never went to Mass. The Swedish authorities caught him. They looked at his file. They said, in fact, you have nothing to do here. So he was deported. He arrived in Switzerland. He applied for asylum in Switzerland. Switzerland told him no. He arrived in France. He applied for asylum in France. France said no, but he stayed in France, and he was not Catholic. His file says no. So this is the guy that the whole world said was a Christian terrorist who clearly was shouting in the name of Jesus Christ as he stabbed babies, and he turns out to have been deceptive all along and was really a Muslim, according to an official who handled the case and told all this to the guy who stopped him.
And you could see where people would get that idea. See, when there are Islamic terrorist attacks, we know that Muhammad said, "I have been made victorious with terror." So terror is a tool that you use to gain victory over the unbelievers. So that leads us to suspect that terrorism could very frequently have some basis in Islam. But the same goes for Christianity, because Jesus said in John chapter 45, "Blessed are those who slaughter babies in the name of Jesus."
People are going to believe you.
Oh yeah, I keep forgetting how stupid people are.
There's no John chapter 45, ladies and gentlemen, and there's
Yeah.
no such statement in what there is in the Gospel of John. We got to make sure here. Anyway.
Yeah, and so this would be like, even if you did have it, like you could always have some nut job and so on who you could have someone who's born and raised in a Christian area and goes to church all his life and just loses his mind and goes and slaughters a bunch of people. The main issue would be, is that actually derived from your religious beliefs? If so, where are you getting that from? And somehow, if a Christian were to go do it, it would be, you see, everyone has this problem. But in Islam, where it's actually advocated, and where you don't have to look hard. There's been 46,000 Islamic terrorist attacks since 9/11. 46,000 people screaming Allahu Akbar, slaughtering unbelievers in the name of Allah, and we're never allowed to look into why at all, ever.
Indeed. Interesting story out of Syria also that is connected to this, David. And this was a guy named Ahmad. Sorry, let me try that again. This is a guy named Ahmad al-Kaka. And that's his real name. He said,
they should have named him Dookie. That would have been funny, right? Dookie al-Kaka.
There you go. Yes. Anyway, he put a lengthy message, posted photos rather, on his Telegram account, asking people to come to Syria to wage jihad. And he says, "Oh Allah, a second migration in which we prostrate on the thresholds of Al-Aqsa Mosque as conquerors and glorifiers of Allah." But what is most interesting about what he says in all these calls for jihad is this. He says, "I'm not one of those who pretend to be an advocate of peace, and that we shall be busy with trade, teaching, and work. If that were the case, we would not have migrated to Syria. Rather, we are advocates of peace for those who are at peace with us, and advocates of war for those who are hostile to us, and our duty is to support the oppressed." So he said, "I'm not one of those who calls for peace."
No, what did he say? Pretends?
Yes. Pretends. Let me make sure I got it here. "I'm not one of those who pretend to be an advocate of
There
peace."
you go. Can't leave that one out, because what's he saying? He's saying other people are actually pretending. There are people who pretend. I'm not pretending.
Indeed. And what's interesting, though, he does say, David, we got to give the devil his due. He said, "We are advocates of peace for those who are at peace with us, and advocates of war for those who are hostile to us." So if we don't start nothing, nothing's going to start. Am I right?
From the perspective of defensive jihad, that would be correct, as long as you understand that their concept of what constitutes an attack is much broader, like even criticizing their religion or something like that would be considered an attack. And it's not just bringing a military over there. If you were simply funding anyone who has been against you or any of that. So anyway, they would have a much broader concept of what constitutes an attack and would justify retaliation. But you have had a history of offensive jihad, trying to subjugate the world and so on. But they right now seem to be trying to consolidate and so on. So they're in a defensive mindset where, as long as you're not coming after us, we're going to focus on taking over and establishing ourselves.
Especially in Syria, where they can easily make the case that a Muslim land has been invaded, and thus defensive jihad becomes an obligation on the entire Muslim community worldwide, every individual Muslim. And so consequently, he's making the case on the basis of defensive jihad to try to show that all Muslims should be going to Syria to fight. But that does not rule out the existence of offensive jihad at all, unfortunately, because it's founded on the Quran. Fight them until persecution is no more. That's defensive jihad. And religion is all for Allah. That's offensive jihad, because obviously if you're just minding your own business, but your religion is not all for Allah, then you're still supposed to be fought.
And then you get to, of course, fight those who do not believe. And that is clear. Then you're clearly fighting people just because they're not Muslims.
There you
And
go.
that ties in with Muhammad. I've been commanded to fight people until they say there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger.
I don't know how you can say that's defensive, but they do. But they are, of course, they're the ones who pretend to call for peace, not like Ahmed al-Kaka. All right, we got France here. We got a story out of France, oddly enough, David. St. Louis Church in Saint Germain en Laye, something like that. Where is this guy from? Let me see. Oh, there's no information. I'm sorry, there's no information about where he's from. But he walks into the church. He shouts a familiar slogan that we all know and love, or at least we all know it. And that would be, what do you think he shouted, David? Can you think of it?
Peace and tolerance, or Allahu Akbar.
I'm afraid it's Allahu Akbar, yes. Oddly enough, because they usually shout peace and tolerance. Anyway, there's 15 people in the church waiting for the 6:30 p.m. Mass at St. Louis Church. And the individual shouts Allahu Akbar and then heads to the altar where he pulled down his pants and showed them his behind. Now, David, this is an unusual kind of jihad. Speaking of Ahmad al-Kaka and all that, but what I don't get here is the...
No, I was just thinking of what he could have said. It would have been funny if he went up there and he said, I will show you the crescent moon. And
there you go. That's it. The contempt for unbelievers that we're seeing here, surely that is a violation of everything Islam teaches, does it not? Is it not?
Yeah, because you're supposed to be as nice as possible to everyone, because everyone's created in the image of God and has certain inalienable rights according to Islam that must be respected.
In reality, though, the problem is they have no respect for Christianity, which is considered to be a twisted, hijacked version of the original Islamic message of the Muslim prophet Jesus. And consequently, this guy shows his contempt in the church on the high altar.
And isn't it amazing, Robert? They keep going after like churches and so on, right? Just roll up into churches, attack churches, burn churches and so on, run up into church services and so on. Meanwhile, these guys like block roads to pray. And they're like, look, these guys won't say a word to us. They're too tolerant. Look, watch.
Oh yeah.
Watch. We can block traffic and just pray in the middle of the street. These guys are. And if you, Robert, were to walk up to them going, guys, come on, I'm trying to get somewhere. Quit blocking traffic. People would go after you. Shame on you for being so intolerant. Meanwhile, these guys are rolling up into churches and disrupting services and so on.
Absolutely. And rolling up into churches and disrupting services is all of a piece with praying out in the street. Because, I've seen it on Twitter several times, or X or whatever, that people say, there are so many hundred mosques in France or Sweden or whatever. So why are the Muslims out praying in the streets? And several times I've answered, because there are so many hundred mosques in France or Sweden or wherever this is taking place. The point of praying in the street is not because there aren't enough mosques. It is to assert presence and superiority and supremacy. And that's what that's all about from beginning to end. So there's only going to be more of it the more Muslims you have. Let's go to Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh...
I've seen lots of stuff coming out of Bangladesh for a while.
Yeah, it's bad. Ever since the Sheikh Hasina regime fell and Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus took over, it seems as if the jihadis are running wild. And one of the things that they did on Christmas this year, David, was while in the Tripura Christian community, which is the people belonging to the Tripura community who follow Christianity. They were in church on Christmas night, and while they were away, jihadis went to their village and destroyed 17 of the Christians' homes while the Christians were off in church. So they came out of church, went home, and there was no home to go to. Their home was a smoking ruin, courtesy of the jihadis.
I have to say, as much as that sucks, some of these stories are significantly worse.
I got some of those, David. In Nigeria, they stormed the Christmas celebrations. This was in Benue State, in the Kwande local government area, and the jihadis murdered 12 people and abducted 7 children as young as 2 and 6 years old. And this was going into the Christmas Day celebrations and killing people and abducting the children right there.
But Robert, how have I not heard anything about that? I mean, you know, I deal with jihad on a regular basis, and yet I never see this stuff. I check the news every day. I just don't see this stuff. What's going on?
Every news article that the Western media publishes has to fit a narrative. And it's especially true when it comes to Muslims, that Muslims are brown victims and Christians are white oppressors. And every news story has to fit that. If it doesn't fit that, they won't print it. So when Nigerian Muslims kill Nigerian Christians, it does not fit the narrative. It is ignored. So I get these from sites that track Christian persecution. They are all laid out at jihadwatch.org with the source. You can check up on them yourselves, but they're not in the establishment media.
It's weird.
3 days before Christmas, also in Nigeria, in Plateau State, armed jihadis killed 14 Christians, and those included a pregnant woman and a 1-year-old girl shortly after a Christmas carol service. And so that's 2 of the attacks during Christmas celebrations in Nigeria. Why are they targeting Christmas, David? What is the point?
Same reason. Well, obviously, it's the celebration of the incarnation and birth of Jesus Christ, and it's odd because Muslims supposedly believe in the miraculous conception and virgin birth and so on, but they know we're celebrating the deity of Christ, God entering into the world. But also connected to that, it's the same reason for a jihadi attacking people on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. There are Muslims who want to launch a terrorist attack and simultaneously want to make sure they're not hitting any Muslims as collateral damage. And so for those kinds of things, you attack a concert, you attack some sort of Christian service, you attack a Christian area, you attack a place where people are drinking and listening to music, and that way there's no danger of you actually killing a devout Muslim as collateral damage.
Yep. And so there's more of that out of Nigeria. This is the late Father Tobias Chukwujekwu Okonkwo. Tobias Chukwujekwu Okonkwo. And he was martyred this past week. He was a Catholic priest who was shot dead by jihadis on the day after Christmas, not long after the abduction of a 75-year-old retired Anglican archbishop, the Most Reverend Godwin Okpala, whose whereabouts remain unknown. And so this is an ongoing campaign of terror. Yes, somebody's asking. Yes, this is Father Okonkwo was a Catholic priest, and he was murdered by jihadis this past week.
Not a peep about it.
Not a peep about it. Meanwhile, this is...
Hey, little side note, Robert. What do you think would have happened if it had been Christians slaughtering a Muslim imam?
Oh, that we would hear about. There's
That would
no
be
doubt about
international.
that.
That would be international news for the next 6 years,
Oh
and
yeah.
would be brought up anytime any Christians are slaughtered by Muslims, and we would say, "Look, these guys are slaughtering. These Christians are being slaughtered by Muslims." They would say, "Oh, but look when Christians killed the imam. See, everyone does this. Everyone."
And not only that, but you and I would be blamed for it.
Yep, be our fault.
Yep. This is. Let me get his name here. I don't want to get these guys' names wrong. This is Al-Haji Lambo Ilela. And he is a Muslim cleric in Nigeria, 75 years old, in Zamfara state. And he, by contrast to the Roman Catholic priest that we were just talking about, this Muslim cleric, this Imam, Al-Haji Lambo Ilela, he has admitted that he has been offering what he called spiritual support to the jihadis in Zamfara and Katsina states in Nigeria, and that they have paid him handsomely for spiritual support. Now, why would jihadis, what on earth is that all about, David? Why would jihadis want or need spiritual support?
It's almost like it's a spiritual endeavor.
Yeah. Now, that is a very important point because most people don't realize that jihad attacks are, in a certain sense, an act of worship. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Well, that is the greatest thing you can do. Muhammad was asked, "What can I do that's greater in reward than jihad?" He said, "I do not find such a deed." There's nothing that is a greater act for Allah than slaughtering unbelievers in the name of Allah. And so I don't know what to do at that point. If you say the greatest thing that you can do for God in this religion is basically sacrifice yourself, you're offering up yourself as an offering on the altar to your God while killing other people, and you're offering them up and so on. So it's considered the greatest possible thing you can do, and that's where you get the guarantee that you're guaranteed paradise. You've just sacrificed yourself, slaughtering other people in the name of Allah. That is the supreme act of religious devotion in Islam.
So it's a holy thing. It is like prayer, like reading the scriptures, like communion for Catholic or Orthodox Christians, like taking care of people who are poor or in need. It's considered to be a sacred act, and this is a very important aspect of why jihadis do it, and they are untroubled in their consciences when they do these things. I think this is an ongoing thing that people in the West just don't understand. So many times I've been speaking somewhere and they say, how can they do these things and think that they're religious people who are pleasing God? And well, you have to know about their religion. It's not like religions that you're more familiar with.
That is one of the biggest ongoing problems with people in the West, is they think all other people are like them, and all other religions are like theirs, and they can't see anything else at this point.
Precisely. So I had to get, since we were talking about that Muslim cleric, I had to get this guy in just to show his picture, because I think this man really radiates the joy of Islam. And this is Enver Kili. See, I need AP to tell me about this guy because I don't know how to say this. It's one of those C's with a tail. Kili Karslan. Anyway, that's his name. And he says that celebrating New Year, since we're doing this on New Year's Day, we just missed this, but he was telling people, don't celebrate New Year's Day. It's a Christian tradition and inconsistent with Islamic values. Now, why would it be so important for this joyful fellow to tell people not to celebrate something that's a Christian tradition? I thought they're supposed to respect the people of the book.
Yeah, not quite. You have to actually be very careful, because you cross some lines and then you accidentally find out that you're a Christian. So if you accidentally become friends with a Christian, hanging out with Christians are your buddies, then according to the Quran, you are actually a Christian if you're on their side. But also, just, I mean, you might find yourself in all kinds of shirk, Robert. You might just find yourselves in all kinds of shirk.
Yes, indeed. And there are many hadiths in which Muhammad says don't imitate the Jews and the Christians. And so Enver, the mullah, Enver Kiliharslan, or Charslan, or whatever his name is, from Turkey, he is making sure that there is no such imitation. We had an incident in Lebanon that was like the one in France. A guy walks up into the church, goes up to the altar, and screams Allahu Akbar. He did not pull down his pants as the guy did in France, but he did yell Allahu Akbar in the middle of a church. This is something that I think we're seeing. It seems to be increasingly common. And maybe the jihadis are feeling a bit more confident now. What do you think?
I was just thinking about a song.
Yes.
There's a place in France where the naked Muslims dance.
They go to the church and they pull down their pants.
We got to make a little one of those little AI songs right there.
It's going to be a hit single.
And just have the article up on the screen about the guy pulling his pants down.
Yep. It's going to be huge. All right, here's an interesting story out of Germany, going to the stupid infidels portion of our program tonight. Did you hear about this, David? Now, the Magdeburg attack, we missed it because last week took off for Christmas. But of course, I think everybody knows there was another vehicular attack, very controversial, in Magdeburg, Germany at a Christmas market. And the perpetrator was an ex-Muslim. And I think that you've done some shows about this. Have you not? Could you give us a little capsule summary of what the situation is there?
Well, so you had a guy who is officially an ex-Muslim, critic of Islam. His Twitter was filled with mockery of Islam for a long time. Was accusing the German police of protecting and conspiring to protect an organization that pushes ex-Muslim women who are becoming refugees into prostitution. So there's supposedly an organization, an ex-Muslim organization, that is really it's basically saying, hey, ex-Muslim women, if you're a refugee, come here and become part of our organization. And they turn them into prostitutes and porn actresses and so on. Anyway, he's saying that, and he said, and I notified the government, and the government actually attacked me, and they're conspiring against me and stealing my stuff and so on. But he attacked a Christmas market, which would be a pretty characteristically jihad attack and so on. And so AP and I, by reading his posts and watching his videos, and because he's interacted with a lot of ex-Muslims over the years, everyone got creeped out by the dude, like there's something mentally wrong with this guy. And so we came down. We favor the view that he's actually like ex-Muslim, atheist with mental problems, and he's crazy. But we acknowledge that this is a situation where you have like 5 or 6 alternative theories which you can make a case for, because it's basically a situation where you have information to go on, but all the information comes from unreliable sources. Like him, if he's mental, he's pretty unreliable in what he's saying. If he's got a mental problem, if he's practicing taqiyya, he's an unreliable source of information. So whatever the information from him, it's all in question. And so and then you had information from Saudi Arabia saying, oh, but he fled us because he's doing this. Okay, I regard Saudi Arabia as an unreliable source of information. So we're in this weird situation where we say, okay, this is how it seems to us, but there are like 5 or 6 other positions you could take that we do not regard as like. Sometimes people have a position, you just say, okay, that's insane, right? Like if you're looking at this terrorist attack and saying that it's actually it's the U.S. government launching this attack because they want to attack Iran. That's what Candace Owens suggested, right? The United States is behind this attack to justify an invasion of Iran. This guy's from Texas, right? So anyway, that I regard as like insane. You sound like a lunatic. But me and AP were basically like, okay, there's 5 or 6 positions on this issue that we would not regard as crazy. So one, he was just pretending to be an ex-Muslim just because he wanted to get out of there. wanted to get out of Saudi Arabia. There are people who do that. If you want to get out of a Muslim country, you just say, "Hey, I'm an ex-Muslim, and they're going to kill me here." And they say, and Western nations say, "Oh, come here, come here." So that's the idea. There's the position that he was a radical Shia. There's a position that he's actually he was a jihadi all along. There's the idea that he was an ex-Muslim, but then he eventually reverted and he wanted to atone for all his criticism of Muhammad. And so then he launched a terrorist attack. There's the idea that he had planned this all along and he was just practicing deception all along. And there's the idea that he's an ex-Muslim and he has mental problems. And he's actually thought, because what he said in his videos, he said, the German police are conspiring with this ex-Muslim organization to turn ex-Muslim women into prostitutes. Therefore, I'm blaming the German police for keeping this woman for keeping this organization functioning. And I blame the German people for keeping the German police propped up. And therefore, I'm attacking German people, which is weird because that's an Islamic sort of mentality where if you are doing something to me, I'm not just going after you, I'm going after anyone who's responsible for keeping you in power to do this to me. Most people don't usually have that idea, but he did. Anyway, so I favor the ex-Muslim with mental problems view, but also combined with he was influenced by his upbringing in Saudi Arabia to think that you can attack anyone and so on. With that said, again, there are like 5 or 6 other views that you could make sense of because the information is inherently unreliable.
There were a couple of ex-Muslims who I saw. One of them said he was never a real ex-Muslim. I knew this guy, and he was a devout Shiite. And another one said he was never an ex-Muslim. I knew this guy. He was a devout Sunni. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I put both on Jihad Watch because I thought, well, I don't know if he was a Sunni or Shiite. Coming from Saudi, he could have been either because the Saudi Arabia, a lot of people don't know, they have a very significant Shiite minority, about 10% of the country. And he could have been either one. Maybe the people who knew him weren't sure themselves, but they did agree on the idea that he was not really an ex-Muslim. They had interaction with him. I don't know. We may never know, but in any case, I only brought it up tonight because they're a very interesting sidebar to the whole incident came to light in the last few days. And that was reported in the German press. It said that a firm was hired, David, to provide security at the Magdeburg Christmas market. And do you know this story?
Nope.
The name of the firm they hired was Mecca Security.
I guess that's kind of smart. That's like France for the Olympics. Who did they get to do their security? Like Qatar or something like that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, let's get. It's actually pretty. It's messed up, but it's smart. It's like, hey, let's get the mafia to protect our stuff, because then. I mean,
well, there were two.
Maybe people will be less inclined to attack if we have Muslim security.
There was a big gap between the bollards, the anti-jihad bollards that they had set up to protect the Christmas market, and that's where he drove his truck through. So you got to wonder if he got tipped off and if Mecca Security was involved. It's questions should be asked. Meanwhile, however, the German government is going with one story. You saw this, I'm sure. Nancy Faeser, the foreign minister. Where is she? I know I have her picture here. There she is. There is the winsome Nancy Faeser, the foreign minister of Germany. And she said the Magdeburg attacker was obviously Islamophobic. And they're treating it as an Islamophobic incident as a pretext to crack down further on Islamophobia in Germany. Now, of all the different scenarios for this thing, why is that the craziest?
Because he attacked a Christmas market?
Yeah, if he was obviously Islamophobic, there are plenty of mosques in Germany or other Islamic installations that he could have attacked. Instead, he attacks a place where he can be reasonably sure there were no Muslims present, as you pointed out before in regard to churches. That these are places that jihadis like to target because they can be sure there won't be any Muslims involved as collateral damage. And so Christmas market, it's a favored jihadi target. There have been several jihad massacres at Christmas market, several foiled plots just this past Christmas. But she's sure it's an Islamophobic attack.
When according to him, so even if you go with the view that this is the side again that me and AP came down on, that this is actually an ex-Muslim who had like believed that people were conspiring against him and so on. If you go with his words, on this, he was attacking German people for propping up the German police who were turning ex-Muslim women and girls into prostitutes, and so it's kind of a that's not Islamophobic there. That's the German government is conspiring against me and stealing my stuff to silence me for exposing their scandal of turning ex-Muslim women and girls into prostitutes and porn actresses.
But of course, a member of the German government, a German government official, is not going to be wanting to have fingers pointed at the German government itself.
Yeah, of course not. So
he's happy to deflect.
So this kind of proves him right. You see, the German government's still conspiring to cover up his message.
So Nancy Faeser turns out to be right. No, Talib Abdul-Mohsen turns out to be right. I'm sorry. Nancy Faeser, the German Interior Minister, turns out to be wrong yet again, as always. Meanwhile, another news item that happened this past week, David, is that former President Jimmy Carter is no longer with us. And he died at the age of 100 on December 29th. And so, as is usually the case, when a president dies, you get a lot of people telling us what a great man, what a fine man, what a good man he was. And David, I just want to point out that Jimmy Carter was friends with Islamic jihadis. In that picture there's Jimmy and about to give a big old friendly hug to Ismail Haniyeh, the late leader of Hamas. There are other photos available of him with Khalid Mashal of Hamas, as well as Bashar al-Assad. And Jimmy Carter, of course, was criticized for his deeply unfair criticisms of Israel as an apartheid state and all that. But a lot of people don't know how friendly he was to actual jihadis.
Well, we don't know the context of that picture, Robert. Suppose that the jihadi broke the world record for eating peanuts. I mean, look at him. And Jimmy Carter wanted to thank him personally for funding his peanut farms, and so reached out and embraced. No, I saw years ago, I forget where this was. It was either at ISNA or I think it was at ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America. But I went there, and Jimmy Carter was one of the speakers.
It's the Islamic Society of North America? I didn't know that.
I think so. It was at a big Muslim event. I'm trying to think. That's the only one I can think of that I went to, but yeah.
Islamic Society of North America, ladies and gentlemen, is serious bad news. Muslim Brotherhood linked organization. Muslim Brotherhood dedicated in its own words to working to eliminate and destroy Western civilization from within. And so if Jimmy was off speaking to them, man, he was seriously duped.
Yeah, and here's the thing. It's I think Jimmy Carter was actually a nice guy, but not the sharpest peanut farmer on the planet. In other words, I think he's so nice that he's just really easy to manipulate and really gullible and always, so if you come up to him, hey, I slaughter unbelievers in the name of Allah. You want to be friends? I want you to be friends. Oh yeah, well, let's be friends and stuff.
Yeah, actually, you're right. When I was writing the book about Israel that I put out a few years ago, The Palestinian Delusion, I've got a lot in there about the Camp David Accords, including Anwar Sadat talking about poor naive Carter and how he's going to give him everything he wants because Carter was entranced with Sadat, thought he was a big hero, and did not like Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, at all, and so he essentially gave the Egyptians everything they wanted at Camp David, and Israel had to make major concessions in return for empty promises. So that was Carter. Meanwhile, we have some people are on the verge of a... Yeah?
Quick question.
Yeah.
We're not talking about how nice they are, how they are behind the scenes, what kind of people they are.
Yes?
Who do you think's a better president, Joe Biden or Jimmy Carter?
Carter's got it all over Joe's the worst ever. Joe is
That's tough.
you have all 40, how many, what is it, 40, I lose track because they're counting people twice now. So Trump is 2 presidents, Grover Cleveland's 2
He was
presidents.
twice. Mm-hmm.
So Trump is 47. So if you take 2 off, that's 45, and then 44 without Biden. So 44 presidents. So there's 44 presidents, and Carter is at number 44. And then there's 100 miles of waste, and then there's Biden. It's that bad.
Jimmy
it's not
Carter,
jihad.
he's in the middle of the Cold War and he couldn't pronounce the word nuclear. He never
I
could.
remember that.
He would say
Yep.
nuclear.
Yep.
Peanut. They elected a peanut farmer and he's talking about his concern about nuclear weapons.
Oh yeah, those were great days. Well, everybody was upset with Richard Nixon, so they would have voted for anybody over.
Then they got sick of Jimmy Carter for being a crap leader and stuff. And Ronald Reagan had the sickest burn. This is why they called him the Great Communicator. Ronald Reagan had the sickest burn of all time I've ever seen, and he had several. But Jimmy Carter was asked about whether the recession is going to turn into a depression, and Jimmy Carter goes, "Well, I don't know the difference between a recession and a depression." And Ronald Reagan goes, "Jimmy Carter says he doesn't know the difference between a recession and a depression. Well, let me explain it for him. A recession is when a neighbor loses his job. A depression is when you lose yours. And this one won't end until Jimmy Carter loses his." And I was like, whoa, that's they called him the Great Communicator for a reason, man.
Yep. I loved the famous age thing he did with Walter Mondale in '84.
Another brilliant move. Yeah, that was crazy.
Anyway, all right. Look, we got to go back to Jihad here, Dave, a little bit. This is Bertrand Chamoulaud, and he is the head of the National Directorate for Territorial Intelligence at the French Ministry of the Interior. And he just got a clue, David. He said that the Muslim Brotherhood is working to turn France into an Islamic caliphate. And I think, what was your first clue, Bertrand Chamoulaud? It's only been 20, 30, 40 years since it's been
them
obvious.
Proclaiming it, of them shouting it from the rooftops.
And meanwhile, we had in Portugal the former Portuguese ambassador to Qatar, Antonio Tanger Correa. And he said that Qatar is trying to establish an Islamic caliphate. And I thought, now there's a dark horse candidate, because we know Turkey's trying to establish a caliphate. We know that ISIS claims to be a caliphate.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that there are people trying to establish caliphates in Europe. So now we got Qatar trying to establish a caliphate. Is that at all remotely plausible, David? Really?
Yeah, and this is matter of fact, after the Shia crescent started collapsing, I posted. I said the Shia axis ruled axis of terror run by Iran is collapsing. It's going to be replaced by a Sunni axis of terror led by Turkey. And but there I was talking about something local. They had their ideas on like the Ottoman Empire, right? It's like Putin wants. It's like Putin. He would love to kind of have what the Soviet Union once had.
Mhm.
You have Erdogan who would like to have what the Ottoman Empire used to have, but that's local. Qatar is actually like they're buying up everything around the world. They own like 20% of Heathrow Airport now, but they're the biggest shareholder in like the biggest supermarket chain in the UK. They're the biggest foreign funder of various universities and so on in the United States. And they're not just being generous and saying, "Here, take hundreds of millions of dollars." There are connections, and it's been studied how the money from Qatar that's funding into these universities, you suddenly see an uptick in pro-Palestinian articles and so on, and fewer articles going against that narrative from the professors on these campuses and so on. So these guys are being smart about it, and that's actually more concerning. Well, like if you have Iran, we're going to terrorize the world and take it all on, slaughter, death to America, death to Israel. That's dangerous. But at least you can spot those guys. You can spot those guys really quick. Erdogan, he wants like a local caliphate and so on for now, but harder to spot. Harder to spot. I mean, he's a NATO ally. Harder to spot, right? Doesn't just come right out of it and start saying death to everyone, right? But Qatar is just, hey guys, money, here's money, here's money, here's money, here's money, here's money, and all that money. All that money. On the one hand, they're investing in businesses around the world, in which case now they're making money for the future for their projects, but the money that they just give to people as donations and so on, that's always tied to furthering their agenda. And these guys are in bed with the Muslim Brotherhood. They're buddies with the Muslim Brotherhood.
And every American Muslim organization of any significance is tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. Also, speaking of Turkey, David, Ilham Ahmed, who is a Kurdish leader, she was interviewed recently in a leftist paper, Jacobin Mag, and she said that the Turkish state's goal right now is to bring the whole of Syria under its control. And that, of course, is in line with Erdogan's caliphate dreams. Meanwhile, I wanted to take it back to Canada. Let me get this guy. Here he is. This is Tariq Abdul Halim, and he is a Muslim cleric in Canada, and he is openly in favor of Al-Qaeda and in favor of jihad in Syria. He urged the new government in Syria to impose martial law, leave the door to jihad open, do not dissolve the Sunni factions, enforce justice quickly and severely. And he said, the Alawites killed 2 million Sunnis. I don't know if that's true or not. This is what he said. But certainly Assad's regime was repressive enough. Could be true. Isn't killing 10 or 15,000 Alawites an appropriate response? That's what he said in a sermon this past week. And what I wonder is, why is this man in Canada?
Probably Trudeau's favorite pen pal or something.
Oh, yeah. Interestingly enough, in Canada, there is an official department. There's an official Islamophobia czar,
Can't have enough of those.
El-Gawabi. Yes.
Can't have enough of those.
Polices Islamophobia in Canada. And Pierre Poilievre, the opposition leader in Canada, the guy who you said had the Frenchiest name that you had ever seen, he said that he was going to dissolve the Islamophobia ministry if he becomes Prime Minister of Canada this year, which could well happen because the government of Justin Trudeau has suffered some serious setbacks recently, and it may be on the ropes.
I think it's going to be a fun year, Robert. Fun year.
Yep. Speaking of Canada, we also had a lady we talked about a few weeks ago. You remember that there was a couple in Washington State, Ishan Ali and his wife Zahra Subhi Mohsen Ali. They have a 17-year-old daughter who they tried to murder in an honor killing because she refused to go back to Iraq for an arranged marriage, and the husband was strangling her outside of her high school and was
Yeah.
stopped by some of the students there.
Yeah. Some of
She
the
was
students
mom.
stepped up. Hmm.
The mom was charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, and assault, and she was just caught trying to sneak into Canada. I suspect she thought in Canada, they're all worried about Islamophobia. She's not going
Hmm.
to have trouble there.
Hmm. Hmm. And she's got a point. She's got a point.
Yep. Um, Unfortunately, though, she was stopped, so we will be keeping up with that case in 2025. There's likely to be more jihad in 2025. We already had a big one, and it's only the first day, so stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next week, God willing, with more jihad, and till then, pray, hope, don't worry.